Hello, Adam.
Hello. This is great.
Look at that. You're straight into it. Go
Sorry,
on.
should I be interviewing you?
Yes, please. Go on.
So, Sam, tell me about yourself.
I do a podcast. It's just started. It's mine. So, Adam Ridgway, you know. Just fucking with you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and coming down here. I know that you're a super, super busy young man. But for the sake of our wonderful audience, who are you and what do you do?
So, I am, by all titles, the one I'm most proud of is human. But I do run a business called One Moto. So I'm CEO of that. And it's a electric vehicle mobility company designed to decarbonise last mile delivery. It's the unsexy side of EV, but at the same time, solving and addressing problems. That's me. That's what I do.
And this is what you currently do.
Yeah.
Now, you have founded 5 companies, exited 4, if I'm not mistaken. What's your earliest memory of wanting to work for yourself or do your own thing?
I would say that was an evolution. The earliest memory, I never really fitted in at school. And there's some underlying deep-rooted issues that I'm sort of dealing with or have been trying to deal with. But there was like the bullying and I just didn't really know where I fitted. But when I was 12, so just gone into secondary school, I had no friends that were from my primary school. And I really didn't know where I fitted in. And about a year into it, there were kids that didn't want to do their homework. And then there was another group of kids that didn't mind doing homework. I was then just the broker for the cost of a dinner ticket or some tuck shop money, because I wasn't given tuck shop money or pocket money. It was, I can broker your homework being done for you by these kids and I would get a reward for it somehow. So that was my earliest memory at the age of 12. And then at 16, I set up a company called Big and Blonde Promotions, which did boat cruises up and down the
Where
River
did the
Thames.
name come from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds, so that was really when I would say I ventured into, I'm going to do this to not just be popular, which on reflection was part of why I was doing it. But putting on these amazing events once a month and everyone enjoying themselves. It was an amazing adventure at 16, 17. I had so much money, but I just didn't, I was foolish with it. I didn't, anything I do in business I'm not money driven. So the deal, yes, fantastic. I live for that. Making impact, yes. The creative problem solving, yes. But the actual sort of financial side didn't really interest me at a young age.
What were the events? What was the tonality of it?
So this is pre-mobile phone, right? So this is
The good old days.
the good old days. So 96, 97, imagine you've got a sort of pre-pubescent, or no, actually 16, I think I hit puberty around that time.
Hopefully.
And so I phoned up. So I'm from Hertfordshire, Essex, that's the way, same as you. And I phoned up this boat cruise company on the River Thames. And I said, hi, my name's Adam. I'm looking to host a boat party, river cruise up and down the Thames on this date, about 4 or 5 weeks' time. And they asked me for a deposit, go through, yes, we've got availability, asked me for a deposit. I haven't got a deposit, but I'll pay you cash when I get there. And they weren't too comfortable with it, but they accepted it. Then I phoned up for a bus company. I needed 4 buses, 53 seaters to be here at this time and so on. And and they said yes. So I had this finger crossed promise from me to them and them to me. And in no way did I think that it wasn't confirmed. And I communicated with them, phoned them up from parents' house. And and it was, the theme of it was getting people together, doing something that they hadn't done before.
What was the age group of the crowd?
They were all school kids. So
I'm just trying to gauge
16 to 19.
what sort of mad parties you were putting on.
They were, the hedonism was fantastic. No, they 16 to 19, 20, that sort of age. And there were 4 schools in my town, Bishop Stortford, where I was from. There was a girls' school, boys' school, mixed school, Catholic school. And but part of my sales process was I'll give you, whoever it may be, plus a ticket to take your boyfriend, girlfriend, if you sell 10. So I had my sales pipeline of school, like the captured demographic, but then I had my sales channels. So they were just giving me cash, I was giving them the tickets, and it was fantastic. So that's how it first started. They were a big success for the first couple. I thought, how can I offer something more? So I contacted local businesses. Thomas Cook was one of them. Lund Poly, I think, was another. There was a sports football. I'm not into football, but it was some sort of football club. And can you donate anything, because we're going to have this raffle on the boats? And they did. We had like holidays that were given away. Anyone that's bought a ticket gets put into the raffle. And so that started elevating. Then after the boats, this is now, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 events in, there were questions about where do we go after? Because we're all getting a little bit older. We're familiar with London. Where do we go after? And I spoke to a couple of nightclubs around the Embankment.
Which ones?
I can't remember the name. But there was the Walkabout, which was the pub, but then there was a few.
Yeah, Heaven was on the Embankment. Yeah,
Heaven was one of them.
Heaven was in a. It was like in a, not a tunnel. It was like an
archway.
Archway.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a couple of them. So I went and approached the guys and girls on the door, and I said, look, I've got X amount of people that are coming in. Can you sort out a guest list? Yes. Yeah. Because I'm bringing. There was about 50 people at the time, but anyone go in with a 50-person strong guest list, it was great. So that was really the theme of where the boat parties started, and that went on for a little while.
Fantastic. And that started a chain of events then that sort of, what was your next? I just want to circle back to one thing, if you don't mind, which is you mentioned bullying.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't want to tweak a nerve about that. Because a lot of people went through this at school. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I was definitely targeted on a few occasions because I was a gobby type individual. But do you think that drove anything in you to start your own business and company, like you said about popularity and stuff like this, and how that might have fed into this early boat park? Because 16 is young to be trying to start your own sort of adventure, and also 12, where you're kind of middlemaning homework.
Yeah,
it's like, do you think that contributed, even though it's a negative experience? Do you think it actually had a positive outcome?
Absolutely. I haven't really thought about attaching the two, the outcome of it, but I suppose it had. And yes, there was a popularity, but I didn't do the boat parties to be popular. That was just a byproduct of, you then blend in the social situation that you're in. Then the older kids are at school. They're the ones that are in sixth form and beyond. And they're the cool kids. They're the ones that have got their lives together. So you think at the time they're...
So you think.
Yeah. Everyone's driving cars and they've got these beautiful girlfriends. And so they're aspirational. All right, a couple of years older than you, but they're aspirational. So did it spur me? I didn't do it as a byproduct to be popular. I need to set up a company or I need to do something. It was just a byproduct of creating cool experiences. The attention's on the experience, not me. I was just the one that was facilitating and putting them all together. But what was really, really cool looking back is that pre-mobile phone, pre-email, pre-internet, pre-anything really, when it came to the having people believe in you and communication, there's a company that's commercially driven, the buses, the boats, and you've got a guy with an idea. And it was through the ability to communicate with other human beings, form that connection, that then created something really positive. And that has been a big driver for everything that I've ever done. And it's building those relationships. So
did you build company after company, which I suppose is another way of asking, have you ever worked for somebody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I have. Was I 18, 19? I set up a company that set up companies. So there was a Portuguese deli in Bishop Stortford. A guy said, and I did, although I don't want to be one of these people that I failed school. I didn't come out with any big qualifications.
I wanted to ask, because we're roughly the same age, in that time, when you're coming into your 4th and 5th year at school, the last 2 years, it's all about your career, university, college. What are you going to be? What are you going to be? What are you going to study? What are you going to be? And did you have to turn around to your parents and go, I want to work for myself?
That wasn't really my goal, to work for myself. I do remember there was a guy called Paul, a careers advisor, and it was around that 15, 16, filling out the UCAS university application. Yeah. And it was my turn to go and speak to this career advisor. And he said, so Adam, take a seat. What are you looking to do with your life? And I said, I don't really know. I was hoping you'd be able to help me. Well, what are you good at? Well, I'm quite good at art. I enjoy that. Beyond that, not much. And he said, well, why don't you go to university and do a fine art degree? Well, I don't really want to go to university. Why is that? Because I love the parties. I love socialising. I don't really want to get into debt. And I'm not really academic, so I don't feel that's the right path. And he said, well, really, to get on in life, you do need to go to university. And after about 10 minutes of him sort of forcing this university route, like, what did your father do? He works in advertising. Why don't you go to university with an advertising degree? And I said, this isn't really helping, Paul. He said, well, what are you going to be by the time you're 30? I said, I'll be a millionaire. And he sort of not smirked, not chuckled, but he's obviously heard it before. And maybe it was an arrogant 15, 16-year-old that said it. He said, well, how do you expect to do that when you're choosing not to go to university? I said, I don't know. And I don't think this conversation is going to help. So I stood up, shook his hand and walked off. And I thought, what a waste of time that was. But what it actually did was incredible.
That is ballsy.
For me, it was just an obvious, well, this conversation isn't helping. And maybe it was arrogance. And I won't say it wasn't. But I don't know where I belong. And I'm hoping that this guy that I'm reaching out to might be able to steer me on a path, find out about my personality, beyond this UCAS book that was several inches thick of thousands of pages. I don't know what some of the courses are. I don't know what the industries are. How can you choose what you want to do? And then looking at school, when you're 12, you've got something like 12, 13 subjects. By the age of 14, you go down to 8, then you go down to 3, then you go to university, do 1. You're filtering, at a young age of being a child, you're filtering down into one specialism. And it's that age where you've got to go and explore. So leaving school was terrible because I just didn't know where I belonged or, what I was particularly good at. So I did. I set up a company. I worked for various different companies. And then at 23, I was working for this overseas property company and there were sort of teams of people doing their thing. And I was just a bit bored and there was no real progression. But I didn't want career progression. I didn't need a title. I didn't really know where I belonged, right? And I contacted an old family friend and I said, I want to work in TV. Okay. Are there any jobs? And at 23, I went for this interview on a TV show called Ready, Steady, Cook.
Yeah.
And working with Ainsley and the crew. Anyway, I got this job and I was a runner. And then I had 7 years of a career in...
It was a very popular show, that was.
It was amazing.
That was a super popular show.
Absolutely amazing. And the runner is equally as important as the director, paid very, very differently. But it showed from that age, even though I was probably the oldest runner in television history, it was showing the value of being a part of a team, which I hadn't had from sort of many other little jobs that I'd sort of had up until that point. But yeah, being part of a team was incredible. And TV, the synchronization, TV events, it gets very, very hectic, as you know, but then it all comes together. It doesn't matter how stressful it is, as long as everyone's playing their part, it comes together for success. So yes, I have worked for other people.
And so what was it when you decided, okay, I think it's a great question for entrepreneurs, which is, right, I'm working for people, but now it's time to jump. What was the sort of trigger that made you go, right, it's my turn to climb Mount Everest, as people say?
Yeah, it's actually in Dubai. So I'd done my career in TV, living in North London. 2008, my uncle was living in Dubai. He came over to see me. He said, "Ed, you got to live in Dubai. You got to give it a go. The energy, the optimism, the opportunity is just incredible." He totally sold it, and he was the age difference between my parents and me. So he wasn't an older brother. I had to respect he was an uncle, but he was my idol. He had the cars and the watches, and he just had that stockbroker life. It was just amazing. Anyway, so he was here, and I thought, let's give it a go. I'm just existing in the UK, loving what I'm doing, but just existing. And I worked for a company out here, a production company, for about 6 months. And every day I was going in, bearing in mind I'd worked for shows for BBC, Channel 4, ITV, Endemol, like the biggest of the biggest production companies. And I was just facing no every day. What about this? No, it won't work. What about this idea? And my job was to build formats or TV treatments for shows and deliver these new ideas. Well, no was the answer. And I don't like that word. It's unnecessary.
What were some of the ideas you were coming up with?
Okay, so do you remember the show Faking It? It was where you take
I remember the
someone
name, yeah.
out of their normal life, give them 4 weeks training, and they can then fool judges into another career. So this wasn't an original idea. It was Faking It. I thought it'd be beautiful if you could create or carve the narrative in a positive way. Not that Dubai is faking. There was no relationship to that. It's taking someone out of their day-to-day life and look at the life they could have in Dubai. You could take a foreman of a construction site that could then end up being a Formula One racing driver, right? You could really take and create this massive, because Dubai is full of opportunities. So the show worked in the UK, worked in the US, and when I presented it over here, they were like, no, it won't work. And it wouldn't work in the US. So in the next slide, I said, actually, here's the company that have produced it in the US, and it has been successful for many seasons. So that was just one idea, and there were loads for various different radio stations and so on. When I got into TV, I loved creating something or being part of a team where the audience have feel-good value, or those nuggets of take-home, little pearls of wisdom, like there's 1,200 different types of mango, like a totally benign, great for general knowledge pub quiz somewhere down the line. But there was a tremendous amount of want for people to watch TV and feel something from it, because it was content in general. Growing up, it was a really sociable thing. Yes. You know, you sit around the TV as a family on a Saturday and watch Gladiators and the 9 o'clock movie and Blind Date, whatever it was. But it was a social environment. Whereas then TV started to go into the wife swap or that schadenfreude, you know, capitalising on others' misfortune. And I didn't really like that. So I stepped away from TV from that regard. But then I stepped into the food, the Epicurious type of food, factual entertainment, that type of TV. And I just wanted to carry that on. So that was the TV career.
And so how did that then translate to the next adventure past that?
So after I heard no, I had my resignation letter in my pocket for a few days. I thought the next time I hear a no, I'm just going to give him my resignation with the reference of, you know, I don't like this word and it's unnecessary.
Do you think that when you were presenting your ideas and you were getting a no, did you start to think that the no's were too quick?
Yeah.
So they're just going, no, it's not going to work. And that, because I think that there's a way to say no. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely there is.
Where you actually have to take into consideration someone's put some effort into doing something. I've said no to my teams in the past too quickly and got a real ferocious reaction sometimes where you're like, you haven't even read it.
Yeah.
You know
the no that comes from, it's either I'm too busy, or it can be the person that's pitching the idea hasn't carved the narrative or created the time and pre-framing. I'm going to be presenting something, please listen to it with this rationale, then make a decision. If you don't pre-frame it in anything in life, you're not necessarily going to get the answer. But that's the art of negotiation, I suppose, to some extent. I'm sure there's a book written on that somewhere down the line. But yeah, so I had this just far too many no's, and I thought, I know these ideas. Some of the ideas that I had, tens and tens of them that have been presented, the no I was receiving was, I don't want to put any effort in. And that doesn't resonate with me at all. So after this, I then looked at the media industry as it was back in 2008, 2009. There was no platform for the media industry to communicate, whether it be through jobs or classifieds or advice or just news. So I created this online platform that was like LinkedIn back then and Facebook without the, or say Facebook back then. So you had the social and professional networking just for the media industry. There was a site similar that worked in the UK and US, but there was nothing over here. And as the media industry was growing, more and more companies, there were more and more people trying to get jobs, even though it was a terrible time of, the downturn. I thought, I'm gonna solve a problem here, not just for me, but for anyone else that was in my position. So that was the launch.
And that was the first.
Yeah.
How did that go?
It was all right.
Good.
The first 6 months. So the reason why it was called Media Cubed is I believed that you could dissect the media industry into one of three dimensions: production, creative, and talent. Mm-hmm. So any job, any position, any company within media can fit into one of those. So hence the name. And I was going out to company, and my father was in advertising. So taking the advertising agency 50 years ago, it did everything. It wasn't just branding or just marketing or just, say, social or just digital. It was an ad agency that looked after their clients from start to finish for longevity. And that was what I wanted to create for myself. But when I was speaking to early customers, the likes of Ericsson, MasterCard, I believe, go big. You can work with small companies, but go big, challenge yourself. And it's the power of perception as well, right? And I just kept the customers we were going to, as big as these organisations were, they didn't understand what Media Cubed was. And I thought, how can you not get it? We do everything. What do you want? We do it. There was nothing that we didn't do. And we did loads of different things for various different events. And then I thought, if I fractured Media Cubed as the entity that people don't get, make it more bite-size, which now sounds a little bit patronising. It's not wasn't meant to be. And then I had ad brand, advertising branding. So if you want to talk about advertising branding, this is the company to speak to. All right, it's going to be, at the time, it was just me. Then production, anything to video content, there's a company called Video. That's what we do. Then you had Dot Casting, which was the casting and talent agency. So, but what actually, so although as an online platform, no one was recruiting, there's no real business there, that as an initial concept failed. But what it did unveil was three other entities that can feed into and off of each other. So we'd go in with a marketing campaign, and then surrounding that would be a video. Do you need a video to be produced? Yes. Speak to this company. And then do you need talent to be in this video? Yes. Or speak to this company. So all of a sudden we're able to charge from three different companies to produce the final output. Whereas if we charge the same rate for one entity to do it, you then start having to negotiate discounts and, the standard business stuff, so it's far more profitable, like dramatically. And then in the down season or the off season of events where there were no DJs, bands, musicians, actors, you can't really film outside because of that hazy weather in the summer. Ad brand took the business forward, and then when in quieter months in the event season, Dot Casting was the one that brought in the money. So did it? Yeah, it failed as initial concept, but it was the catalyst for
breaking
success.
It up into individual sections and then actually reaping better rewards from that.
And it also was, for me and the team, it was a way of them fractionalizing how you approach a project. Because, when I've now just got my branding creative mind, or let's go into the TV production, directing, producing, script writing, pre-production. I go into that side. So you're able to then hyper focus on one channel.
Okay, and this is a company you exited, and I always like to ask the question: how did you know when to exit?
This is great. I for about 18 months before I exited, I was thinking. So I bought a house, got married. I think it was like something like the year before. Got married. The year before that, got engaged. So it's that journey you go through, right? And then I was having a child. We just renovated. There was a lot of change going on. And there was that question of, am I going to do the same thing for the next 10 years? Or am I going to do something that could make a difference? With all this change, and Dubai just being that place where if you don't like change, don't live here. Just through osmosis, you have to embrace it. So that was sort of one part. And I thought, let me just see if Media Cubed has the value that maybe it does. And it was always built to be a lifestyle brand, not built for exit. And a couple of buyers said that really the only value in the business is you. Like without you, there is no value in the companies, or not, the considerable value. So it took me 18 months to reverse engineer myself out of the business. So emotionally disconnect, structure various different processes to make it they're all being them individually standalone businesses. And then it's, what am I going to do with my next choice? And there was a bit of an overlap of about 3 years with One Moto as a side project that then gained a bit too much traction. And I was bitten by, this is the thing that I needed to really focus on to bring change. And then it's a global brand. That was the vision right from the start. I never built a global brand before. It was regional brands, lifestyle brands, but not building a global brand. How do you do that? Don't know. Let's give it a go. So that was the transition.
And this was 2020?
2020 we launched. 2016 was when sort of identified a potential problem, potential solution, loads of questions. No one else is doing it. Why? Is it a good thing that no one else is doing it, or is it a bad thing? Right? It's identifying that problem.
How do you know what a good thing is? Because entrepreneurship is about finding a hole and trying to plug it.
Yeah, some entrepreneurs will go out there and think, right, what are other people doing? How can I mimic it? Or how can I mimic what they do but do it better? And you don't have to be innovative all the time. Innovation doesn't have to be there with every single startup. It could be incremental betterment. There's no issues with that either. But it's just doing something, doing it differently. Others will try and force they'll see a gap in the market and then focus all their energy on that, which can be devastating. Because if you looked at the businesses surrounding that industry, well, the natural progression is for them to fill that gap. They're
going to get there faster.
They're going to get resource.
So what inspired you to move into electric vehicles?
I've always been a bike rider for most of my life, and I was riding a Vespa. I don't know if you ever saw it. It had the lights and the mirrors.
Yeah,
the real modded
Vespa's classic.
So I had one for about 7 years. So winter, summer, I was on it all the time. I just loved it. And anywhere I've ever traveled in the world, it's always been on two wheels. So there was that as a passion, I suppose, for two wheels. But then in 2016, we were working with one of the delivery companies, and I noticed that there were more and more orange bikes being used from Talabat. And I think they came out of Kuwait, and there was just more and more bikes on the road. Now, being a rider, not really seeing that many delivery bikes and then seeing an abundance of them, that was sort of part of the acknowledgement there is an industry here. But I was really lucky. I had a classic car that I wanted to get converted to electric. And I went to 3 garages. 3 said, yes, we can do it. 3 failed. And I walked out of this one garage and I just saw this spectrum of beaten up, battered, bruised motorbikes, and they're relatively new. I thought, I wonder if anyone's creating those electric. And then did some local, regional, international research. No one was. Harley was talking about an electric motorbike. And then I thought, right, there's a problem here. I went to meet Kareem. What do you need from a delivery bike? So you speak to your customers or potential customers. What do you need from this? I don't know about the delivery industry. And there's lots of things I don't know, but I also know that with engineering of a vehicle is incredible, very, very complex.
Yeah.
With battery powered technology, it's far more simpler. There's still incredible engineering, but not as visual incredible engineering. So I got a team of people together, said, this is what I'm looking at doing. I did all of the research. I was in that rabbit hole of really trying to understand not just the industry from the use case, but from the riders, from the global or say international markets. Then you look at the technology. How can we not be superseded by tech advancements? I think there might be something in this. And then I worked with RTA, ESMA, governing body, and we were the first to launch two-wheeled EVs in the region. And once it got to that point, after 18 months of getting the certification, that's when I thought, I'm going to go all in with this.
And what's been the main challenge with developing an electric motorbike?
From a development of tech point of view, there's the advancements of tech, the battery propulsion, like the motor, battery.
Range.
Range is one of those. Is it an issue? It can be, absolutely. If you treat an EV the same way as a, say, ICE or petrol fuel powered car, then they don't operate the same way, nor should they, right? But you want convenience is the most important thing. You want to walk out of your house and know that there's a vehicle that I can use. So autonomous vehicles and shared mobility, and you've got to have convenience. It needs to be affordable. In the delivery market, that last mile scene that we operate, we understood what the companies need, but then we, from a rider's point of view and a collection of riders, we knew what the safety needed to be. Then when you look at the advancements of what that technology is, you sort of have a few issues with problems, and one of them being range anxiety. Well, what about if you don't focus on producing bigger, better batteries that are more costly, which then affects the affordability, but you can then look at advancing and optimizing the routes or the delivery routes. That's an operational thing.
Yeah.
That's still tech, but it's on the hardware, software, telemetry. Focus on that. Then if you can optimize routes, riders can do more deliveries over less amount of time, so high volumes of deliveries, less working pressure, therefore they're riding safer. There's less accidents, less fuel costs, less servicing, less maintenance.
Why is there less accidents? How do they ride safer?
Well, a lot of the riders, I can throw out loads of stats.
I love stats.
A lot of the riders will, to break even, they need to do about 14 deliveries a day.
Okay.
The average delivery volumes at the moment are 0.9 deliveries an hour. So just do the math on that, is about 15 hours a day.
Yeah.
That should be illegal, in my opinion, to be on the road riding a commercial vehicle 15 hours a day. It is in most other parts of the world, so really it should be here.
Yeah, especially in the midday to 4 o'clock weather that is pretty standard here. It's either hot or really, really hot, you know, and it's not comfortable.
It's not. And so if you just took that 15 hours a day, then, and the riders need to, because of the way they're paid, they need to hit a certain quota. Ideally, 18 to 20 deliveries in a shift is what the companies want and or say expect. So there's a huge amount of pressure on them to deliver as many products as possible. Then you've got the issue with supply and demand of there's too many riders out there on the roads waiting to receive orders, and there's just supply and demand. There's not enough orders to fulfill them. So you end up with a lot of riders not having as many volumes. And if you take away that working pressure, so we can optimize a route, so you're actually working in a micro zone, I call it. From that micro zone, you can either batch your orders or deliveries, and then you can end up doing more over a less amount of time. You're traveling less kilometers, less tired, less pressure, less so on. So that naturally reduces accidents.
How long do they take to charge?
80% in 1 hour. Or you could just swap the battery out for a brand new one.
Because I think this is always been my uneducated. I want to lay that out there, that I don't understand and know too much about it. But it's always been my thing, which is I think people, when it comes to electric, they want to have one, to say they've gone electric and everything else, but they want it to behave like their petrol car. So they want to take it to a station and, to put fuel in, electricity, and within 2 minutes you've driven out.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works, is it?
It's not.
You have to buy into the change. It's like you said, they behave completely differently. Thus, you must change the way you run your life in order to facilitate the vehicle.
Yeah, 100%. If I said, where's the nearest petrol station to here, you'd probably be able to list about 3 within a few kilometres. Yeah. Where's the nearest EV charge point? I don't know. Maybe at a petrol station or a shopping mall. You'd have a guess. So the infrastructure's been built over, let's say, 50, 60 years. You know where to go and fill up your car. Then you look at the investment that's previously gone into that. That's been billions over many, many years. Now there's the supply and demand, or say demand of EVs, with a weaker supply chain of vehicles coming into the country. You've then got a lot of private sector companies that want to invest in EV infrastructure. But then you've got the public sector as well that are almost seen as the enablers, definitely, but they're the ones that should be investing, as they say have traditionally to allow the fuel stations, petrol stations. Who pays for it?
Yeah.
Is it the landlord? Should it be DWA? Is it private sector? Is it public sector? You're talking billions that would need to be invested over a very short amount of time. That raises a lot more questions because it's capital intensive as opposed to an OPEX type of initiative. So there's quite a few nuances of problems. And when I built One Moto, we did it in a modular way, from the vehicles, from the management of the way the teams operate, and internationally how we expand. It's how do we build a business that isn't reliant upon third-party involvement as much as possible. So you have your certifications, but then now we've got that over 13 countries, then it's just an admin process. So that will always be there. But how can we, if we had to rely on charging infrastructure like you do with cars to be built, we wouldn't be selling any vehicles. No, yes. So how can we build with the technology that's available, with the future-proofing as much as you can, the awareness of batteries get smaller, bigger, motors get bigger, more powerful. How can we then adapt and adopt the best technology to avoid the friction? And
how many EVs do you have in circulation?
There's a few thousand across 13 countries. Not all of those countries have bought vehicles yet because some of the contracts are relatively new. We've got another 24 more countries in conversation. So now I'd say we're international, modestly international now. But when you then have multiple dealerships in multiple countries, that's the journey that we're going on to then be considered global.
Okay. Because I think that with the electric conversation, one of the things I always think about is the transition time, where on the one hand, you have electric powered vehicles being phased in for sustainability, conservation, climate change, et cetera, and you have you have like a panic narrative coming about how this has to happen, now, you know what I mean? Because the next 10 years, this is kind of what you get. We've had this for decades. We've also had it definitely ever since Al Gore did the documentary movie An Inconvenient Truth, which I was fascinated by. I think it was back in 2004. And of course, it's got a lot of substance. I think that the statement is a gas-powered truck, if bought brand new today, has a 16-year shelf life before it's come to the end of its cycle. So therefore, it's how long is it going to take to phase in electric powered vehicles across the board?
Yeah, great.
Do you know what I mean?
It's a difficult one to calculate because it is about the end users, whether it's their capitalization or access to capital, cost of capital. whether they see ESG, the environmental side of or sustainable mobility of important. Is it needed? Is it nice to have? There's a lot of different viewpoints and oculars of where do we need to be. What we're finding is a lot of those listed companies or companies that want to list, their focus is on the ESG, which totally makes sense. Then when you start with the narrative that, say, motorcycles, there's 92,000 on the roads in Dubai, delivery bikes, which are producing 260,000 tons of CO2 each year, which is the same. It would take 290,000 acres of forest to sequester that amount of CO2 each year, which is basically from Dubai Airport to Yas Marina, Yas Island. That's where it then becomes more of a visual of there's a problem here, and that's just motorbikes. To get the mass adoption, in Dubai, it's a slightly easier calculation because in Dubai, you're only allowed to register a commercial vehicle for 4 years before it then it can't be registered as a commercial vehicle anymore. And that's where a lot of those vehicles get sold to Iraq, Bahrain, Africa. So if you think about it, 25% would roughly be the percentage that would be replaced each year. But it's the biggest challenge is that want versus nice to have. Most people that drive an EV, I'd say in the early days, a lot of Tesla drivers would be for status. Very few are for the environmental benefits. You look at internally, it's going to save me X amount of money. So most people in the UK where EVs have been, the uptake has been phenomenal.
That's the big one. It's the money.
It's where the cost of fuel is expensive. Servicing, maintenance, you don't need as much with an EV, far from it, but it's just part of owning a car, isn't it? The way we've grown up, it goes in for its MOT once a year. It's okay. You might have to spend $1,000 every now and then on bits for your car. It's just one of those OPEX considerations. When you've got a car, you know there will be some refurbishment, if you like. With EVs, you don't have that. But there's the concern of if I do need to replace the motor, how much is that going to be? There's a lot more considerations on the cost, but it's what money am I saving right now is sort of the optimal question.
Are there any initiatives being? Because again, like I say, the narrative of almost panic to make this happen for the sake of climate change, et cetera, is. Are there any narratives being sort of worked up where governments, global governing bodies could turn around and say, right, okay, from 2028, no one's allowed to produce a gas-powered car, ever again. The only thing you're allowed to do, and I say this because my car, though you're going to hate me for this, is a Dodge Charger. V8, gas guzzling, noisy, loud vehicle. But it's 2023, but it's the last year that Dodge are doing a gas-powered Charger. The new Chargers coming out are going to be electric, which is weird when you think about an American muscle car being electric. So are there initiatives coming where they're just going to drop the hammer? Because this is the way I kind of think, where it's like, why doesn't everyone just go, from that year, no more gas-powered cars. You want a new car after that, you have to buy electric. And maybe governments turn around and start to say, Sam, we'll give you 60% of the Dodge Charger value. Take that away. You have to put that money towards an EV. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, and get on with it, mate, because the planet's going to shit. That's pretty blunt.
It could be. It won't happen.
Yeah.
It won't happen because the automotive industry is just far too powerful, whether it be unions or the amount of people they employ,
the lobbyists
and the tax
and stuff like that, and the
GDP
States,
and revenue. So it won't happen from that perspective. But where it could have that influence is on navigating that supply demand and the ratio and the equilibrium there. If the UAE government, which I've been lobbying for a while now, if they were to say by 2028, no delivery vehicles are going to be petrol powered anymore.
Perfect, yeah.
Then all of a sudden it would be good for the industry because it allows more players into the market, which you could argue creates competition, but it's good, healthy competition. But it's also better from the environment and the data that the government can access. Our vehicles are like smartphones on wheels. They're so much data. So then the UAE or maybe the GCC wouldn't be seen as a high growth market for Honda, Bajaj, and the other current petrol motorcycle providers. Then you start expanding that into other countries. Iraq, for example, because of part of our lobbying, they banned the import of ICE petrol motorcycles a couple of years ago. Ethiopia, they banned the import of any ICE vehicles.
What is an ICE vehicle?
Sorry, internal combustion engine.
Sorry. Nice.
It's an industry term.
No, I learned stuff on this. That's cool. Do you know what I mean?
So when you look at Ethiopia, then banned ICE vehicles from import. Yeah. That's not just us. That's others that are also lobbying, but lobbying for a reason. It's not lobbying for self-gain. It's lobbying for the betterment. And the governments listen. So with that, if those spores were to then be adopted, that would naturally phase out the production.
Okay. And my last sort of question to you in this EV world is, this is going to sound maybe a bit silly, but if we all switch to electric, how do we create enough power to power these things?
This is part of the infrastructure issue, right? If you've got cars are slightly different because they take a lot more power. And one of the biggest pain points of an EV owner is the convenience. So like you said earlier, you go to a petrol station, 2 minutes and you're out again. Depending on the state of charge and the charging capability of that EV output charger, it could be 45 minutes, could be half an hour. It could be 10 minutes. 10 minutes might be too long. What am I going to do in that time? I want to be moving. That is where sort of the biggest problem is. Then when you look at where does the energy come from? Yeah. There was a stat that was told to me, so I haven't validated it, but there was a 50-story tower block in Abu Dhabi, and they were looking to put in 10 like superchargers for EVs, and those 10 would have taken more electricity draw than the entire 50 tower block to have that 5-10 minute charge. So when you look at that, that's incredible. So you do need renewables, but then who invests in that? You might have a charge point company or an operator. They can get the charges from a supplier, validated, they're suitable for market, but then where does the energy come from? They then have to wait for that energy to be sourced, sort of manipulated into suitable output. It's difficult, really, really difficult.
Seems very, very, very complex.
It is. And I've had this theory, I'm not sure, that at some point, coming closer to 2030, someone's going to say, I've invented this new fuel that is powered by water, whatever the technology is, where it doesn't need, so EVs aren't necessarily going to be the final solution. It will be a conversion of your existing car. I just feel that someone's going to come up with that.
You'll swap it out, sort of thing.
Yeah, 'cause if you looked at most car parks and you think, are any of these cars going to be classics in 30 years? Apart from if you look at yours. But are they going to be classics in 30 years? Most of them are really benign, whether it's in design and ability and performance specs and so on. Very few of them are. So when you look at those cars with a value of, if I was to go and get them converted to electric, spending $20,000, $30,000, is it really worth it? Probably not. So I don't think conversions for the everyday car is going to work. You've either got native production of EVs, the classics that will then take, why wouldn't you? You've got a beautiful looking car and it's not very much in comparison to what the car, sort of the end value, resale value and longevity of that car. So, yeah, I'm waffling now.
No, but the thing is, where I completely agree with you, and I also know this through my own self-behaviour, which is, it's I think people are far too precious over their vehicles, for instance. And for me, it has a similar tie into your mobile phone. So the latest mobile phone comes out, you got to have it. I've got the iPhone 16. It's got 4 cameras and it can do all this. Well, do you use that?
Yep.
I don't. No, you don't. I have an iPhone 16 and I still only use it in the same way as I use the iPhone 10. You know, and I think with a car, you know, all the cars I've ever had, when you upgrade or you change, you're very excited. You know, when I got my charger, you know, like this. But I don't do anything different in it that I did, you know, in my Mitsubishi Pajero. Sorry, I just had to look at my watch there for a minute because the timer's going off. But I did anything different than I did in my Mitsubishi Pajero 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. And I think that people don't want an electric vehicle, but I reckon if you ask them, they couldn't really give you the right answer. They'd probably just turn around and go, yeah, well, I like petrol, innit? And you're no.
It's one of those. So in Dubai, we've got a low cost of fuel. So here is the absolute playground to go and get your dream car, whatever that poster car was on your wall at whatever time. Yeah, go for it and get the boring car.
That's actually very true. Yeah,
with if I then do a lot of, say, psychological brand customer journey studies for now and then the future. And I believe that the youth, so the next generation of potential car owners, they're not bothered by brands. They don't have to have the Lamborghini or the BMW or the Mercedes. Yeah. They're not as bothered by it. They're still aspirational, but it's not as important as it is to our generation. And it's similar to our parents' generation, where not everyone was really that bothered by the brands. It's more practicality or function over form. And so I believe that the youth are not going to be focused on brands. And if you take most EVs that are out there on the roads, like the modern ones, other than Tesla that we're most familiar with the design, you could debadge pretty much any of them and just swap the badges around. Yeah. You wouldn't know if it's a Hyundai or a Kia, or you just wouldn't know. Nor does it matter. You can have the same 15 buttons. You can have the same linear torque, speed. It doesn't really matter. So I think the future of mobility ownership is going to be shared as long as affordability is there. So that micro-mobility space of bikes, or say bicycles, mopeds, micro cars for inner city usage is going to be where it's at for the future.
Fantastic. So is it only bikes that you're doing?
No, we do motorcycles, vans, like commercial vans, and we've also got a micro car that hasn't been launched yet. Working at
what is a micro
car? You know,
like Citroen C5.
No.
Was it the Citroen C5 back in the 80s?
No. Was it Dolly
car?
No.
Oh, that's going to do no, forget it. That
Citroen CV.
It was the thing.
Dolly car, the round.
It was like a long thing that had 2 wheels at the front, 2 wheels at the back, 1 at the front. It was in the 80s.
Oh.
And you got in it, and they thought it was going to be the next big thing, and it was an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
It wasn't a Citroen. Sorry, Citroen. It was not a Citroen C5. That's going to kill me now. Anyway, sorry, but what is a micro car?
A micro car is a small, convenient inner city car. So it still has its 4 seats. You know, a smart car.
Smart car, yeah.
They're small cars, right? So that is where, if you take the stat that I believe is also true, that 80% of us will be living in urban environments by 2050, we still need to move. You can retrofit to an extent the public transport networks in some cities, not all of them. So the above ground network needs to be operational as well. So micro cars where you can park them anywhere, you have a fleet of serviced or ride hailing services is where it's going to be. And so we've got a car that's ready to launch. We're just working on which key market that will be launched this year.
Fantastic. And okay, so this is now your life's work. This is going to be the mission, you know. And I suppose I've had a lot of petrol heads on here. Okay, I've had a wonderful guy called Alan Boyd who's trying to break the world land speed record on a motorbike. Built the crazy head of a car club, head of a bike community and stuff like this. And along the way, we've all giggled I won't lie. Do you know what I mean? The episodes are there to be watched about electric. What would you say to them, you know, about how they could reshape their thinking towards switching? What's your kind of, I'd say, your narrative or your statement directly to the petrol heads? And I will say, because I went to a drag racing event down in Abu Dhabi, and there were chargers and drag race, all kinds of stuff. One guy comes out in a Tesla like this, crowd laughs, starts booing. Do you know what I mean? Right. Yeah. And didn't win his race, but my God, it was quick. Do you know what I mean? My God, it was quick. You know, and that made me go, yeah, no, they've got the speed. Do you know what I mean? So what would you say to the petrol heads coming from the electric side of things?
I find EVs, I will answer the question, but the conversation around EVs are similar to vegans. It's similar to religion, you know, where it can then be, or environment sustainability, you can end up preaching. And I'm not that guy. You know, you end up giving advice or giving an opinion. It's like preaching. Everyone should go EV. Everyone should. It's look at what you have a car for and what's important to you, and then make your choice. EVs, to some extent, are overpriced for the everyday person. If you see the value of, I just want to go from A to B, then what? You know, can I afford it? Can I value? Do I value what the price tag is telling me to pay? So I love classic cars. There aren't any classic EVs unless they've been converted. So if you love a V8, V10, V12, whatever, if you've got that passion for cars, carry on with your passion. If you operate a commercial fleet, that's where I've got an issue.
Okay.
That's where I will
fair enough. Yeah,
preach
I get that.
the benefits. It's still you to make that choice. But if you've had that dream car, that 911 or Lamborghini Countach or whatever the car was, or that poster car as a kid, and you have dedicated your life's work and efforts to achieve that because that's important to you, and you're driving that with the amount of pride that I imagine it would take to save up for 20 years or however long it's been to get that, then you absolutely deserve to drive that car and enjoy it.
That's beautiful, man. I did not see that coming. I did not see that coming. Do you know what I mean? Because the petrol heads are just so anti-electric. You know.
Yeah, they've got more of an issue than anyone else. I think it's.
Do you know? But what you've said, actually, they should take heed to. And I'm not saying that just because you're sitting opposite me and this is a live recording. It is the fact that that just makes Namash. That's going to stay with me because it makes a lot of sense. Which is have your toy. You know, that comes from whatever era, because they are cool. But when you're talking about, like you said, delivery services, taxis, fleets, vans, everything like that, that's not yours. You are using that as a service. And that when you look at a singular Talabat bike, you see one. But if there's a million of them, you know, yeah, I get that. That en masse changes a lot of things. That's very cool. Yeah. Take heed, petrol heads. You know what I mean? So look, this has been superb. I'm really glad that you came on. It's a brilliant journey and it's a brilliant life you've got. My final question to you, though, as an entrepreneur, as a serial entrepreneur, you know, that knows the highs and lows, I sort of have a thing about, you know, what people call Gen Z coming through the ranks and everything. They're very, very different to us. They've grown up in a much different world that we created for them, but seem to hate them for the way they're using it. But they all want to be entrepreneurs. They all want to start their own businesses. And I suppose what would be your key message to a young Adam Ridgway, you know, that's starting out today?
Yeah. There's so much more choice these days, you know, from social media wasn't an industry or a sector when we were growing up, when we had that choice. AI wasn't discussed a few years ago. So there is so much choice now. When you look at a company, I would say, when you look at starting out, don't start out because you want to be an entrepreneur. That's a terrible journey to go on. If you reflect or, you know, introspectively look at what do you value, what do you like, what do you need? And if that is the warmth of guardianship and mentoring, go and work for a company. It doesn't have to be forever. but get to a point where you've paid your dues and you've learned and you've got wisdom. So you come out of school or university, you've got knowledge. You've got the likes of us that have been in industry for years. We've got wisdom. The only difference between those two is experience. So go and get your experience. Learn from others that are far better than you. Learn from those sages that have made the mistakes. Make your own mistakes. Over time, with wisdom, those mistakes that you make are going to be less expensive, hopefully. So the journey of do not go and be an entrepreneur to say that you are one, because no one's going to respect you for it. And it's certainly the worst decision that you could ever make as the narrative. Is it because no one else gets you? Maybe you need to look at yourself. Mm-hmm. No one's solving the problem that you are. Well, partner up, take that to a big organization. Try and run that team, try and build that team with intel that could implement it. Because dependent upon the business, the amount of time, effort, money, the sacrifices you have to make, friendships, relationships, you don't mind when you're too young because you don't pay too much attention to that when you're young. But when you're older doing it, they could be devastating. And you think, is it really worth it? But the biggest question to answer, I suppose, ask yourself, and if you possible answer it, is what are you doing this for? What is the end goal? Am I doing it for an answer that? That's the question I would ask myself. And it's been many years before I realised, what am I doing this for? What am I going to hang my hat on?
Fantastic. It's beautiful, man. Great way to end. No, it is, you know.
I like the question.
You know, Adam Ridgway, thank you so much for coming. And I wish you all the best. And it's great to see you again. It really is.
Thanks.
Nice one.